coffee in my hand had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but I didn't notice until my brother slammed his palm on the kitchen table and said, "Sign the papers tonight, or I'm changing the locks before Mom's burial." I was 31 years old. I had just watched my mother take her last breath 6 hours earlier, and my older brother was standing in her kitchen, the kitchen where she used to make biscuits from scratch every Sunday morning, telling me to sign away my half of her house or sleep in my car. I set the coffee cup down very carefully. I remember thinking, don't break anything. Not the cup. Not yourself. My mother's name was June. She raised the two of us alone after our father left when I was 4 and my brother was 7. She worked double shifts as a hospital billing clerk for 15 years so we could have health insurance and school clothes that didn't come from a donation bin. She was the kind of woman who remembered every nurse's name on her floor, every neighbor's birthday, the exact way each of her grandchildren, my brother's kids, liked their eggs. She never asked for anything. She asked for one thing. Near the end, she asked me to move back home. I had been living in Columbus 2 hours away, working as a dental hygienist. I'd built a decent life for myself. Small apartment, solid job, a best friend named Cassidy who I ate Thai food with on Friday nights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine and it was steady. When my mother called me in March and told me the oncologist had used the word aggressive, I drove home that weekend and never fully went back. I sublet my apartment. I transferred my patient load to a colleague. I moved into my childhood bedroom with the faded yellow curtains my mother had sewn herself, and I became her primary caregiver. My brother and his wife. They lived 40 minutes away in a nicer suburb. They visited on Sundays. Sometimes. I'm not saying that to be bitter. I understood they had kids and jobs and a life that didn't pause the way mine did. What I didn't understand, what I couldn't have prepared for, was what came after. My mother passed on a Wednesday in late October. Hospice nurse, quiet room. The smell of the lavender lotion I'd been rubbing on her hands for weeks. I called my brother immediately. He arrived 90 minutes later with his wife, and they spent more time on their phones than they did sitting with her. I noticed it, but I said nothing. Grief looks different on everyone. I gave them that. The papers appeared 4 days later. He set them on the table after dinner, a dinner his wife had brought over in a casserole dish, which I'd been grateful for. And he said our mother had apparently wanted to leave the house to him. All of it. He said there was a document. He slid it across the table. I looked at it. I'm not a lawyer, but I've read enough patient consent forms in my career to know when language is designed to confuse rather than clarify. The document was dated 8 months earlier, March of the same year I'd moved home. It listed my brother as sole heir to the property. No mention of me. I've never seen this, I said. He shrugged. Mom had it notarized. It's done. She didn't tell me about this. She didn't tell me about this. She didn't have to tell you. His wife was looking at the table. Not at me. The point is, the house is going through probate, and my attorney says the fastest way to resolve it is if he just agree not to contest it. Sign the waiver, we split the personal belongings, and everyone moves on. I asked if I could have a few days to look at it. He said I had until Sunday. It was Thursday. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my mother's bedroom. I hadn't changed the sheets yet because they still smelled like her, and I went through every drawer, every folder in her filing cabinet, every envelope in the shoebox she kept on the top shelf of her closet. My mother was not a digital person. She kept paper records of everything. Electric bills from 2004, my report cards, birthday cards she'd received and kept sorted by year. What she did not have was any copy of the document my brother had shown me. What she did have was a handwritten letter, dated 2 months before she died, addressed to me. It was 3 pages, front and back, in her looping cursive. She wrote about the house. She wrote that she wanted us to share it, that if we couldn't agree on what to do with it, she hoped we'd sell it and split the proceeds evenly. She'd spoken to a lawyer, she wrote, a real one, not the family friend my brother had always used. She said she'd updated her will. I read it 4 times. Then I put it carefully inside a plastic page protector and I did not sleep. The next morning I called an estate attorney. Not through any recommendation, just the first woman attorney I found with strong reviews who specialized in probate. Her name was on the door of a second-floor office downtown, above an insurance agency. She saw me that Friday afternoon. She looked at the document my brother had shown me. She looked at my mother's letter. She asked me a series of questions I didn't fully understand, but answered as completely as I could. Then she sat back in her chair and said, "The will your brother has, the one he claims supersedes the original. I need to see the notarization, specifically who notarized it and when." He said March, I told her. Same month I moved home. Same month my mother started treatment. She didn't say anything, but she wrote something down. I went home and I looked at the copy of the document I'd photographed on my phone. The notary stamp was there. I searched the notary's license number through the state database. My attorney had told me how. The license was valid. But the notary's address was in my brother's suburb, 40 minutes from my mother's house. I thought about my mother in March. She had just received her diagnosis. She was scared and exhausted, and she could barely drive herself to appointments. She would not have traveled 40 minutes to sign documents she'd never mentioned to me, or I was beginning to suspect, to the attorney she'd told me she'd hired. I called my mother's actual attorney on Monday morning. It took me most of the morning to find him. I found his name on an invoice in her filing cabinet, tucked into a folder labeled simply House. His office was in a strip mall near her grocery store, a 10-minute drive from her front door. When I got his assistant on the phone and explained why I was calling, I was put on hold for 3 minutes. Then he picked up himself. He had a copy of her real will. It was dated 4 months before she died. It split the house equally between my brother and me. It was properly witnessed, properly filed, and entirely legitimate. He also told me he had never seen the document my brother had shown me. He said if a second document existed that predated his filing, there would need to be an investigation into its validity. I sat in my car in his parking lot for a long time after I hung up. The afternoon light was doing something strange and golden through the windshield, and I was thinking about my mother's hands. How thin they'd gotten. How she'd trusted me to be there. How she'd apparently trusted that I would find what she'd left me. I called my attorney. I forwarded her everything. Photographs of both documents, the attorney's contact information, the notary license search results. She called me back within the hour. "Don't sign anything your brother gives you," she said. Not a single page. I didn't. Sunday came. My brother called at 10 in the morning, very calm, very reasonable sounding, and asked if I'd made a decision. I told him I was working through some things with an attorney of my own. The reasonable tone evaporated. He said I was being selfish. He said I didn't understand how much stress he was under, with his mortgage and his kids' school tuitions. He said our mother would have wanted us to handle this privately, as a family, without dragging lawyers into it. He said, and I remember this very precisely, "You lived there rent-free for 8 months. You got more than your share already." I want to note that I had used my own savings to cover my mother's out-of-pocket medical costs during those 8 months. Her insurance covered most of it, but not the specialized supplements, not the hospital bed rental, not the particular brand of wound dressing that was the only kind she could tolerate. I kept every receipt in a folder on my phone. I had not done this strategically. I had done it because I was her daughter and she needed things, and I bought them. But I kept the receipts because she had asked me to, one afternoon when she was more lucid than usual, and she said, "Keep track of what you spend, sweetheart. It matters." She had known something. I think she had known for longer than I realized. The Sunday call ended badly. My brother said things I won't repeat here because some of them were the kind of things that, once you hear them, you can't remember a relationship the way it was before. His wife got on the phone briefly and tried to smooth it over with the tone of someone who has rehearsed a softer version of the same position. I said I had to go. I ended the call. What happened in the following 2 weeks was not cinematic. There was no dramatic courtroom moment, no tearful confession, no door slamming. It was paperwork. It was my attorney sending letters. It was a forensic document examiner, someone my attorney knew, spending an afternoon with both documents and producing a written analysis. It was the discovery that the notary who had allegedly witnessed my mother's signature had, according to GPS records from her company vehicle, been 45 miles away from my mother's home on the date the document was signed. That notary was a neighbor of my brother's wife. She'd lived 3 doors down from them for 6 years. My attorney filed a complaint with the probate court. My brother's attorney, the family friend, withdrew from the case within a week. I don't know exactly what passed between them, but I can guess. My brother hired someone new, someone who apparently told him the same thing mine had been telling me from the beginning. The original will was valid. The second document had significant problems, and contesting it was going to be expensive and very likely unsuccessful. He did not contest it. What he did instead was call me one Tuesday evening in early December, about 6 weeks after our mother died. He wasn't calm this time. He was something I'd never quite heard in his voice before. Something that was trying to be an apology but kept collapsing into justification. He said he'd been under a lot of pressure. He said his wife had been the one who suggested the document, and he knew that wasn't an excuse, but there was always a but. I listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which I think surprised him. When he finished, I said, "I'm not ready to talk about this yet." He said, "Okay." I said, "But I want you to know that what you did, what you tried to do, I know exactly what it was, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of making holidays easier." He said okay again. Quieter. The house went through probate normally. We each inherited half. We agreed, through our attorneys rather than directly, to sell it and divide the proceeds. It sold in February for more than either of us expected in that market, a small miracle of timing. My half was enough to pay off my student loans entirely and put a significant down payment on a condo in a neighborhood I had been watching for 2 years. I moved in on a Thursday in April. My friend Cassidy helped me carry boxes up the stairs, and we ordered the Thai food we used to have on Fridays and ate it sitting on the floor of my empty living room. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. People expect these stories to end with some clean sense of victory, some moment where everything resets. What I felt was tired and quiet and something adjacent to grief, not for the money or the house or even for what my brother had tried to do, for what it meant about him, for the thing I'd had to learn about someone I grew up with, someone who used to split cereal with me on Saturday mornings when we were kids because there was only enough for one bowl. I also felt something I can only describe as my mother being right. She had hired the right attorney. She had written the letter. She had asked me to keep my receipts. She had known, in the careful way that she knew everything, that it was possible things might go sideways, and she had left me the tools to find my way back. I framed the letter. It's on the wall in my hallway, next to a photograph of her from 1987, the year before I was born, when she was young and bright-eyed and did not yet know how hard some of the years ahead would be. Every morning when I leave for work, I see her handwriting. I think that's enough.